The train car sat there like a coffin on wheels. Elijah stared at the rust-eaten metal, the paint peeling away like sunburnt skin. 10 feet away, his brother Caleb stood with his back to him, refusing to meet his eyes. They hadn't spoken a single word in 15 years. Not since the funeral. Not since the fight that broke what was left of their family. And now they were supposed to share this heap of rotting steel. The lawyer had been painfully clear. Both brothers inherited it together, or neither of them got a thing. But the lawyer, with his tired eyes and dusty office, had left something out. Something was carved into the heavy steel door. Something that made the hair on Elijah's arms stand up. 3 keyholes, arranged in a perfect triangle. No keys, no explanation. Just a single line of letters carved deep beneath them. It looked like a name, but it wasn't their father's. Caleb saw it too. His jaw, already tight with anger, seemed to turn to stone. He took a step closer to the train car, his boots crunching on the gravel, then stopped cold. Because the door wasn't just locked, it was welded shut. Thick, ugly beads of metal sealed every single seam. Locked, and then welded. Their father had made absolutely sure no one was getting inside this thing. He'd sealed it with a deliberate, terrifying precision. Like he wasn't just protecting something. He was hiding something he couldn't bring himself to destroy. Elijah felt the weight of the envelope in his coat pocket. The one the lawyer had slipped him after Caleb stormed out. "Don't open it alone," the old man had whispered. But Caleb had an envelope too. Elijah had seen the lawyer slide it across the polished desk. They both saw it, and neither of them had said a word. Elijah ran a hand over the welded seam. This wasn't the work of a man in a panic. This was calculated, methodical. This was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and was terrified of it. Caleb stepped back, his gaze fixed on that carved name. "Who is this?" he muttered, the first words he'd spoken to Elijah in a decade and a half. "Why carve it where anyone could see it?" Elijah moved forward, his palm flat against the cold, flaking metal. This train car had been sitting here for 20 years, abandoned, sealed, waiting. But waiting for what? Or for who? Then Caleb pulled out his envelope. His hands, usually so steady, shook just a little. "The lawyer gave you one of these too, didn't he?" Elijah just nodded, pulling out his own. 2 envelopes, 2 brothers, 3 keyholes. The math just didn't add up. And that could only mean one thing. Their father hadn't just been hiding what was inside the train car. He'd been hiding someone. Caleb finally looked at Elijah, and for the first time in 15 years, the raw anger in his eyes was mixed with something else. Something cold and sharp. Fear. Because if there was a third person, if that name carved into the metal meant what they thought it meant, then everything they knew about their father, their family, their entire lives, was a complete and total lie. The lawyer's office had smelled like old paper and unspoken regret. Elijah sat on one side of the massive oak table. Caleb sat on the other. Between them, 15 years of bitter silence pressed down, heavier than the dusty law books lining the walls. The lawyer, a man named Abernathy, who looked as old as the books themselves, cleared his throat and read their father's will. The property was divided. The small savings account was split right down the middle. Nothing surprising, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the very last line. "And one train car, abandoned on the Eastern Rail Line, to be inherited jointly by my sons, Elijah and Caleb." Elijah felt his stomach drop to the floor. He could feel Caleb's anger radiating across the table. Jointly. The old man had found a way to force them together, even from the grave. Abernathy slid 2 thick envelopes across the table, one for each of them. "Private letters," he explained, his voice a dry rustle. "From your father, written separately." Elijah took his without looking at his brother. The envelope was heavy. He could feel something hard and small inside, shifting against the paper. Caleb stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floorboards. He snatched his envelope, stuffed it into his coat pocket, and walked out without a single word. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. Only then did Elijah let himself breathe. Outside, the afternoon sun felt harsh and unforgiving. Elijah found Caleb leaning against a wooden post, staring at nothing. They hadn't stood this close in years. The last time was at their mother's funeral, and even then, they'd stood on opposite sides of the grave. Elijah approached him slowly, cautiously, like approaching a spooked horse. "We need to talk about the train car," he said. Caleb didn't even look at him. "There's nothing to talk about. We sell it. Split whatever scrap money we get." "It's not that simple," Elijah replied, his voice quiet. "You know it's not." Caleb finally turned, and the fury in his eyes was like a physical blow. "Everything's simple with you, isn't it? Make a decision. Live with it. Move on." Elijah felt the old guilt twist in his gut, but he pushed it down. "This isn't about the past. This is about what the old man left us." Caleb let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "The old man left us a rusted piece of junk on a dead rail line. That's all he ever left us. Problems." They rode to the train yard in absolute silence. Elijah drove the wagon, the reins loose in his hands. Caleb sat in the back, staring out at the flat, endless landscape. It was a forgotten part of the world, dotted with forgotten buildings that sagged under the weight of time. Finally, the rail line appeared, a thin, rusty scar cutting through the emptiness. And there it was, the train car. It sat all alone on the tracks, detached from everything, like it had been left there to die. Elijah stopped the wagon a good distance away. They both just stared at it. Something felt deeply wrong, not just neglected, deliberate. Caleb climbed down first, his boots kicking up dust as he walked toward it. Elijah followed, keeping a few paces behind. Up close, the train car looked even worse. The metal was so oxidized it looked like it was bleeding rust. The windows were boarded up tight from the inside. And then Caleb stopped dead in his tracks. Elijah moved up beside him, and that's when he saw it. 3 keyholes, arranged in a perfect mocking triangle on the door, and above them, carved deep into the steel, was the name. Caleb looked at Elijah, a flicker of confusion finally breaking through his hard shell of anger. "You ever heard this name before?" Elijah shook his head. "Never." They circled the train car slowly, like vultures. Every single edge of the door had been welded shut, not just locked, sealed. Like their father wasn't trying to keep people out. He was trying to keep something in. Caleb kicked at the gravel. "This doesn't make any sense. Why would he leave us this? Why lock it up like Fort Knox?" Elijah pulled the heavy envelope from his coat. He turned it over and over in his hands. Caleb noticed. "You got one too?" he said, his voice quiet. Elijah nodded. Caleb pulled his out as well. They just stood there, in the middle of nowhere, each holding their father's last words. Neither one wanted to be the first to break the seal. The wind howled around them, carrying dust across the abandoned tracks. The train car sat there, silent and waiting. Elijah walked away from the train car first. He had to. If he stayed there another second, staring at those 3 impossible keyholes, he was going to lose what little control he had left. Caleb followed him, keeping his distance. They ended up by a cluster of dried-out brush, far enough away that they could pretend the train car and its questions didn't exist. Elijah sat down hard on a flat rock. Caleb just paced, back and forth, like a caged animal. The envelopes felt like stones in their pockets, weighing them down. Finally, Caleb stopped pacing. "You gonna open yours?" Elijah pulled it out. He ran his thumb over the wax seal. His father's handwriting on the front, barely legible, just said, "For Elijah, private." His throat felt tight, dry. "You first," Elijah said. Caleb let out that same humorless laugh. Always making me go first, even now. But he tore his open anyway. Inside was a single piece of heavy paper, folded just once, and something else. Caleb held it up to the fading light. A small brass key, worn smooth with time. "One of 3, Elijah said, his voice barely a whisper. Caleb unfolded the letter. He read it silently. Elijah watched his brother's face change. Confusion turned to anger, and then the anger melted into something that looked a lot like fear. "What's it say?" Elijah asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He read the whole thing again, slower this time. Then he crumpled the letter in his fist. "It says," his voice cracked just a little, "that I don't know the man I thought was my father." Elijah stood up. "What does that mean, Caleb?" Caleb threw the crumpled letter on the ground between them. "Read it yourself." Elijah picked it up, smoothed out the wrinkles. The handwriting was shaky, the writing of a man running out of time. "Caleb, if you're reading this, I've run out of time. There are things I never told you, things I should have. The train car holds answers, but it also holds consequences. You'll need your brother to open it. All 3 keys, all 3 truths. Forgive me for what you'll find. Forgive me for what I did." Elijah looked up. "All 3 keys." Caleb's face was a mask of stone. "There's someone else. A 3rd person." Elijah felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He reached for his own envelope, his hands trembling now. He tore it open. Another brass key fell out, landing silently in the dust. His letter was shorter. "Elijah, you carry a guilt that isn't yours to carry. What happened wasn't your fault. It was mine. The train car will show you why. But you can't open it alone. You'll need Caleb, and you'll need the 3rd. Find them before someone else does. The name is inside. Trust what you find. Don't trust what you think you know." Elijah read it 3 times. The 3rd. His father had a 3rd child. A brother or sister they never knew existed. Caleb was pacing again, faster now, his hands running through his hair. "Who is it? Some affair? Some secret family he kept stashed away?" Elijah shook his head, his mind reeling. "I don't know, but the name, the one carved on the train car, that has to be them." They walked back to the train car, this time side by side, the letters clutched in their hands like evidence in a trial. The carved name seemed darker now, more ominous. Caleb traced the letters with his finger. "It's a woman's name." A cold knot formed in Elijah's chest. The lawyer, Abernathy. He would know something. Caleb turned to him, his eyes sharp. "You think he knew about this? The separate envelopes, the private meeting?" Elijah nodded slowly. "He knew, which means this was all planned, for a very long time." Caleb looked back at the train car, at the 3 keyholes and the welded edges. "If there's a 3rd person, they have the 3rd key. And if they have the key, they know about this. About us. About whatever the hell is in there." Elijah pulled out his key and held it up. Small, brass, ordinary. But it fit a lock that guarded something their father had died protecting. Just then the wind picked up, rattling against the metal sides of the train car. The sound was hollow, empty. Like the car itself was taking a long, slow breath. Caleb stepped closer to the door, squinting at the welds in the fading light. "Why go to all this trouble? Why not just destroy whatever's inside?" Elijah pressed his palm against the cold metal, feeling the rust flake away beneath his touch. "Because he wanted us to find it, eventually, when we were ready, or when we had no other choice." Caleb's voice was barely audible over the wind. What could be so important that he'd lock it away like a tomb? What could possibly be worth tearing apart what's left of this family? Elijah turned and faced his brother. The 15 years of silence between them suddenly felt small, insignificant compared to the mystery that lay ahead. "We need to find the third person," Elijah said, his voice firm. "Before we open this. Before we commit to whatever is waiting for us inside." Caleb nodded, the anger in his face replaced by a grim resolve. "But where do we even start?" Elijah looked down at his father's letter again. The answer was there, hidden in plain sight. The name is inside. His father had written inside. Inside what? The train car? Or inside something else? Then Elijah saw it. So faint it was almost invisible, pressed into the dark red wax that had sealed the envelope. Coordinates. His father had pressed a set of coordinates into the wax before it hardened. A location. Caleb saw it too. His face went white. "He's telling us where to find them." Elijah's pulse hammered in his ears. The third person was real. They were out there, living, waiting, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The coordinates led them to a house. Well, it wasn't really a house, more like the skeleton of one. The wooden frame was weathered to a silvery gray, like old bones. The windows were just empty squares, staring out like vacant eyes. The front door hung crooked on a single rusted hinge. It sat all alone at the edge of a dried-up creek bed, miles from anything that could be called a town. Elijah and Caleb left the wagon hidden behind a rocky outcrop and approached on foot. Neither of them spoke. The air here felt wrong, too still, too quiet. As they got closer, Elijah saw things that made his skin crawl. There were fresh footprints in the dust near the crooked door. A piece of faded cloth was hanging in one of the windows, like a makeshift curtain. It looked like it had been put there recently. Someone was living here. Or had been, just a short time ago. Caleb touched Elijah's arm and pointed. A thin, almost invisible wisp of smoke was rising from somewhere behind the derelict structure. Elijah's hand instinctively went to the hunting knife he wore on his belt. They circled the house slowly, staying low to the ground. The smoke came from a small fire pit. The embers were still glowing a dull red. A tin pot sat beside it, half full of water. Whoever was here had left in a hurry. Elijah moved toward the back of the house. The rear door was already slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The room inside was dim and smelled of damp wood and something else. Something sharp and chemical. Like medicine, or a preserving solution. It was a single room. A bedroll was in one corner. A small rickety table stood in the center, with papers scattered all across it, and on the far wall. Dozens of photographs pinned up, overlapping each other. All of them were of the same man. Their father. Caleb stepped inside, his eyes wide. "What in God's name is this?" Elijah moved closer to the wall of pictures. They showed their father at different ages. Some were recent, taken in the last few years of his life, his face lined with sickness and secrets. Others were decades old. But in every single photograph, he was with a woman. The same woman. Dark hair, strong features, eyes that seemed to see right through the camera. In some photos, she was young, vibrant. In others, older, her face etched with a quiet sadness. But she was always there, standing beside him. Always close. Caleb bent down and picked up a photo that had fallen to the floor. His breath hitched. This was taken at our mother's funeral." Elijah looked. The woman stood in the background, partially hidden by other mourners, a shadow in the crowd. But she was there, watching. Caleb's hands were shaking. "She was at the funeral. At our mother's funeral. And we never knew. We never saw her." Elijah scanned the other photos. Birthdays. Holidays. Seemingly ordinary moments from their childhood. In almost every family memory they had, this woman existed somewhere in the frame, hidden in the background, observing from a distance. "She was always there," Elijah said quietly. "The whole time. Watching us. Watching him." The papers on the table were letters. Dozens of them. All in the same elegant handwriting. All addressed to their father. And all signed with a single initial. The same initial as the first letter of the name carved on the train car. Elijah picked one up. It was dated just 2 months before their father died. You promised me the truth would come out. You promised they would know. But you're running out of time, and I'm running out of patience. The train car holds everything. The proof, the documents, everything you kept from them. From me. If you don't tell them, I will. Caleb read over Elijah's shoulder, his breath coming in ragged bursts. She knew about us. She knew everything. And he kept her hidden away out here. Elijah put the letter down and picked up another. This one was much older, the paper yellowed and brittle with age. It was written before Elijah was even born. I won't ask you to choose anymore. I know you can't. But our daughter deserves to know her father. She deserves more than a life of shadows and secrets. Elijah felt the words hit him like a punch to the gut. Daughter. Their father had a daughter, a sister they never knew existed. Caleb stumbled backward, bumping into the table and sending the rest of the letters scattering across the floor. His face was chalk white. A sister? We have a sister? He shook his head in disbelief. And he never told us, never even hinted. Elijah's mind raced, trying to piece it all together. The long trips their father took for business. The money that always seemed to go missing from his accounts. The locked drawer in his study that no one was ever allowed to open. It all fit now. Pieces of a puzzle he never knew he was supposed to be solving. Caleb picked up one last photograph from the floor. It was a recent one. The woman was older now, standing right in front of this very house. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a younger woman, maybe in her early 20s. Same dark hair, same strong features, same eyes. Their sister. Elijah felt something inside him break. Not anger, not even betrayal. Something deeper. A profound sense that his entire life had been built on a lie. That every memory he cherished was only half of the story. And then they heard it. Footsteps. Outside, approaching the house. Caleb and Elijah froze, their eyes locking in shared panic. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Whoever it was, they knew they were here. Elijah flattened himself against the wall beside the front door. Caleb did the same on the opposite side. The footsteps stopped just outside the threshold. A shadow fell across the dusty floor. Then a voice spoke. Quiet. Female. And steady as a rock. I knew you'd find this place eventually. I've been waiting. The door creaked open slowly. A woman stepped inside, not the older woman from the photos, the younger one, their sister. She looked from Elijah to Caleb, her eyes taking in every detail. And held up in her hand, gleaming in the dim light, was the third brass key. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with a dangerous intensity. We need to talk about what our father locked in that train car, because once we open it, everything you think you know about him ends. Her name was Iris. She said it like it was a name they should have known their whole lives. But they didn't. And now here she was, a stranger who shared their blood, holding the key to a secret their father had buried in rust and steel. Elijah couldn't take his eyes off her. The family resemblance was undeniable. She had their father's sharp jawline, his way of standing with his shoulders squared, like he was ready for a fight. Caleb found his voice first, and it was tight with suspicion. How long have you known about us? Iris didn't sit down. She stayed near the door, poised, like an animal ready to bolt. Always, she said simply. I've always known. He told me about you when I was a little girl. He showed me pictures. He would talk about you like you were characters in a story instead of real people. Caleb's fists clenched at his sides. But we never knew about you. We never even suspected. Iris's expression didn't flicker. That was his design. He kept me separate. He said it was to protect everyone. Protect his reputation. Protect your mother's memory. Protect me from the shame." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but her knuckles were bone white where she gripped the brass key. Elijah finally spoke. "Where's your mother? The woman in the photographs?" Iris's jaw tightened. "Gone. 3 years now. She waited her whole life for him to choose us, to choose her. He never did. Even at the very end, he couldn't bring himself to do it." Caleb took a step closer, his posture aggressive. "So, what is this? Revenge? You want what's in that train car for yourself?" Iris let out a laugh, but it was sharp and bitter, with no humor in it. "You think this is about money? About an inheritance?" She held up the key so they could both see it clearly. "This isn't about what's in the train car. It's about what the train car proves." Elijah felt his stomach twist into a knot. "Proves what?" Iris walked to the table and picked up one of the letters from the floor. "Read this one. Dated 18 months before your mother died." She held it out to Caleb. He took it reluctantly. His eyes scanned the page, then stopped. His face went pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. This can't be right." Iris's voice was cold and steady. "Oh, it's right. Your mother knew. The whole time. She knew about my mother, and she knew about me. And she chose to stay silent." The words on the page swam in Caleb's vision. He read them again, desperately hoping they would change. They didn't. It was a letter from their mother to their father. It wasn't angry. It wasn't betrayed. It was accepting. "I understand why you can't leave her. I understand the child needs you. But our sons deserve the truth eventually. When the time comes, don't let them hate you for this. Don't let them hate her. Make them understand." Elijah took the letter from Caleb's trembling hands and read it for himself. He felt the foundation of his entire childhood crack and crumble beneath him. Their mother knew. She knew, and she never said a word. She never fought. She never left. She just carried the secret, a burden she had willingly chosen to bear. Iris watched them, her expression unreadable. "I grew up my whole life knowing I was the mistake, the secret that couldn't be acknowledged. But your mother, she chose that for you too. She chose to keep you living in the dark. She chose to let you believe in a lie." Caleb's voice was a hoarse whisper. "Why? Why would she do that to us?" Iris just shrugged. Maybe she loved him too much. Maybe she was afraid of being alone. Maybe she thought ignorance was a kindness. Does it really matter? The result is the same. "And what's the result?" Elijah asked. "The result is that you lived a lie. I lived in the shadows, and he died before he had the guts to fix any of it." Elijah set the letter down carefully on the table. "What's in the train car, Iris?" She met his eyes, and her gaze was direct and unflinching. "Proof," she said. "Documents. Evidence of things he did that go far beyond just keeping secrets. Things that, if they come out, will destroy every good memory you have of him. Things that will answer questions you didn't even know you should be asking." Caleb stepped forward. "Then why give us the keys? Why not just open it yourself and take whatever's there?" Iris held out her key. "Because I can't open it alone. None of us can. It takes all 3 keys, turned at the exact same time. He designed it that way. He's forcing us to do this together. To face it together." Her expression softened, just for a moment. "And because, despite everything, you're my brothers, you deserve to know the truth, even if it destroys you." Elijah pulled out his key. Caleb did the same. 3 brass keys. 3 people, bound by blood and lies. 3 locks on a door that, once opened, could never be closed again. Iris moved toward the door. "We go now, tonight, before I lose my nerve. Before you 2 talk yourselves out of it." Caleb's voice was strained. What if we don't want to know? What if some things are better left buried? Iris looked back at them from the doorway. And for the first time, Elijah saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. Then you better hope that train car stays locked forever. Because someone else knows about it, and they're coming for what's inside. They traveled in darkness. Iris insisted on it. She said whoever was looking for the train car would be watching the roads during the day. Elijah drove the wagon. Caleb sat in the back with Iris. No one spoke. The only sounds were the creak of the wagon wheels and the wind whistling through the dry brush. The moon was just a sliver, offering almost no light. Elijah had to trust the horse more than his own eyes. Every shadow that danced across the path felt like a threat. Every distant cry of a coyote made his hand move to his knife. Iris had been vague about who else knew. She just said they were people who had been watching their father for years. People who suspected he was hiding something valuable. Not money. Something worse. Something that could ruin powerful reputations, destroy prominent families, and rewrite the official history of the whole region. Caleb finally broke the tense silence. How do you know someone else is coming? Iris shifted in the darkness of the wagon bed. Because 2 days ago, someone broke into the house where you found me. They tore the place apart. They took some of the letters, the older ones, the ones about what he did before any of you were born. Elijah's hands tightened on the reins. What did he do? Iris was quiet for a long moment. I don't know all of it, she finally admitted. My mother would never tell me the full story. She said it was better if I didn't know until the train car was opened. But I've seen enough to know it wasn't legal, it wasn't moral, and it involved men with power, the kind of men who would do anything to keep the truth from coming out. The train yard came into view, a dark, empty space under the sliver of moon. The single train car sat exactly where they had left it. But something felt different. Wrong. Elijah pulled the wagon to a stop well away from the tracks, keeping it hidden in the shadows of a rocky bluff. He just waited, watching, listening. Caleb climbed down quietly. Iris followed, her movements silent and sure-footed. They all stood there, scanning the darkness around the train car. Then Elijah saw it. Fresh tracks in the dirt. Boot prints. Multiple sets of them, leading right up to the train car door and back again. Someone had been here, and recently. Iris's voice was a bare whisper. They're looking for another way in. Caleb started to move forward, but Elijah grabbed his arm. Wait, what if they're still here? Iris pulled something from inside her coat, a small, dark revolver. Elijah's eyes widened. Where did you get that? It was my mother's, Iris said simply. She taught me how to use it when I was 12. She said women who live in shadows need to know how to protect themselves. They approached the train car in a wide circle, staying low, moving from shadow to shadow. The boot prints went around the entire car. Whoever had been here had tried every possible way in. There were pry marks on the welded seams. The boards on the windows were splintered. They had even tried to get in from underneath. But the car had held. Their father had built it to withstand a siege. The 3 keyholes remained untouched, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Still waiting, still guarding the secret inside. Elijah checked the surrounding area. It was empty. No sounds, no movement. Whoever had been here was gone. For now. Caleb stood in front of the door, staring at the 3 locks. His hand trembled as he pulled out his brass key. We do this now, he said, his voice grim. There's no going back. After this, everything changes. Iris moved to stand beside him. Everything already changed, the moment he died and left us this. She held up her key. Elijah joined them, pulling out his own. 3 keys, 3 locks, 3 people who were strangers just a day ago, now bound together by a dead man's sins. On 3! Elijah said, his voice low and steady. We have to turn them at the exact same time. If one is off, the whole mechanism could jam for good. Iris slid her key into the top lock. Caleb took the one on the left. Elijah took the right. Their hands were just inches apart, but it felt like miles of bad blood and broken years separated them. 1. Elijah's heart was hammering against his ribs. 2. Caleb's breathing was shallow and fast. 3. They turned the keys. The sound was immediate, mechanical, a deep, satisfying thud from within the heavy steel door. Gears turned. Tumblers fell into place. A series of loud clicks echoed in the night, like a countdown to 0. Then, silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of stressed metal, the welded seams began to crack. Not breaking, but releasing. They were designed to separate once the internal lock was triggered. The door shifted outward, maybe half an inch, and then stopped. Caleb reached for the heavy handle. Iris grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Wait. Once we open this, whoever is looking for it will know. That sound probably carried for miles. We might only have minutes before they come back. Elijah looked at his brother, then at his sister. Strangers. Family. Are we ready for this? For whatever he was so afraid of. Caleb's jaw was set like granite. No, but we're opening it anyway. He yanked the handle. The heavy door swung open slowly, deliberately, releasing a gust of stale air. The inside was pitch black, but the smell that rolled out was unmistakable. Old paper, ink, leather, and something else. That same sharp chemical smell from Iris's house. Elijah fumbled for a match, struck it on the door frame, and held it up. The tiny flame illuminated the interior, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The train car wasn't empty. It was full. Wall to wall, floor to ceiling, were boxes and crates overflowing with documents, photographs, and thick leather-bound ledgers. It was an archive of a secret life. And in the very center, sitting on a wooden crate like a king on a throne, was a single, massive book. It was bound in dark leather, thick and aged, with their father's initials stamped in faded gold on the cover. Iris's voice was shaking. That's it. That's his journal. Everything he did. Everything he knew. Everything he was too much of a coward to tell anyone. Caleb stepped inside, his eyes fixed on the journal. He reached for it, then froze. Beneath the book, carved directly into the lid of the wooden crate, was a message. It was in their father's handwriting. The carving looked fresh, recent, like he knew they'd be standing here, reading this, right after his death. It said, I'm sorry for what you're about to learn. Forgive me if you can. Run if you can't. They're coming. Caleb lifted the heavy leather journal from the crate. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. The cover was worn smooth, the edges frayed from decades of being opened and closed. Elijah moved closer, holding the match high to provide more light. Iris stood guard at the train car entrance, her revolver now back in her hand, her eyes scanning the darkness outside. Caleb opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakable. Their father's script. Precise and measured in the early pages, but growing more frantic, more jagged as the years progressed. The first entry was dated over 40 years ago. Before their mother. Before Iris's mother. Before any of them were even born. I've made an agreement today. One that will secure our future. The railway company needed land for their new line. The families living on that land refused to sell. I found a solution. Not a legal one, but a profitable one. Elijah's stomach twisted. Keep reading, he said, his voice a choked whisper. Caleb turned the pages slowly. Entry after entry detailed what their father had done. He had forged documents, filed false land claims, used his knowledge as a lawyer to systematically seize land from families who had lived there for generations. All done quietly. All done through legal loopholes he had created himself. Their father had been a respected, trusted man in the community, and he had used that trust to utterly destroy people. The railway company paid handsomely, his father had written in one entry. More than I could make in 10 years of honest work. I told myself it was necessary, that progress requires sacrifice, but I saw their faces when they were forced off their land. I saw what I took from them. Caleb's jaw was clenched so tight, Elijah was afraid he would shatter his teeth. He kept reading. Page after page of guilt, of twisted justification, of watching families spiral into poverty while he built his own fortune on their ruin. Then, he came to an entry that made Elijah's blood run cold. The youngest son of the Miller family came to my office today. He's barely a man, but he's smart. He figured it out somehow. He discovered what I'd done. The documents I forged, the officials I bribed. He said he would expose everything unless I made it right. I can't let that happen. I can't lose everything I've built. What I did next will haunt me until my last breath. Caleb looked up, his face ashen. What did he do? From the doorway, Iris's voice was flat, dead. Keep reading. The next page detailed it in cold, spare prose. Their father had arranged an accident. He'd made it look natural. A young man, a fall from a horse, a broken neck, a tragic, unavoidable death. But it wasn't an accident. Their father had paid someone to ensure that young man never spoke again, never revealed the truth, never took back what had been stolen. Elijah stumbled backward, feeling the full weight of the revelation crush the air from his lungs. Our father was a killer, not just a thief. He was a murderer. Caleb's hands were shaking violently now. There's more. He turned more pages. Years of entries, the guilt eating away at their father like a cancer. He wrote about watching the family of the young man he'd had killed lose everything, watching them suffer while he lived in comfort on their stolen money. Then came the entry about Iris's mother. I met a woman today who knows what I did. She's the sister of the man I killed. She spent years tracking down the truth, piecing together the evidence. She could destroy me. She should destroy me. But when she finally confronted me, something I never expected happened. We talked. We talked for hours, about guilt, about justice, about whether redemption is even possible. I don't know if it is, but for the first time in years, I know I want to try. That was how it started. His relationship with Iris's mother wasn't just some sordid affair. It was built on the shared knowledge of his unspeakable crime. She held the power to destroy him, and instead, they had fallen into something twisted and complicated. Something that had produced Iris. Something that had kept the secret buried for decades. Iris's voice cut through the silence. My mother couldn't turn him in, not after I was born. She realized that exposing him meant destroying her own child, too, making me the daughter of a murderer. So she kept his secret. She held all this, all of them, inside her. And it ate her alive, just like it ate him. Caleb flipped to the final entries. They were recent, written in the months before their father died. The handwriting was almost a scrawl. I'm dying. The sickness is taking me faster than I expected. I don't have time to make things right, so I'm leaving the evidence. All of it. In the train car for my children. All 3 of them. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to choose what to do with it. Whether to expose me and lose everything we built on blood, or to keep the secret and live with the weight that I've carried. I'm sorry to put this on them, but I'm too much of a coward to face it myself. Elijah looked at the crates and boxes lining the walls. Evidence of everything. Forged deeds, bribe records, a list of the families he'd destroyed. Proof of a murder, covered up as an accident. Everything they needed to bring down their father's legacy. And with it, everything they had. The land they owned. The money they'd lived on. The good name their mother had died believing in. all of it built on theft and blood. Caleb closed the journal with a snap. He looked at Elijah, then at Iris. What do we do with all this? Iris moved deeper into the train car. She started gathering documents, her movements methodical, determined. We take it to the authorities. We expose everything he did. We give back what was stolen, even if it destroys us. Elijah felt his chest tighten. That money paid for our education, our land, our entire lives. If we expose this, we lose everything. Caleb's voice was a whisper. We already lost everything. We just didn't know it until tonight. The foundation was rotten the whole time. Iris held up a document. It was the original, stolen deed to the Miller family's land, the land their father's house was built on. Before Elijah could respond, Iris froze. She held up her hand. Listen. They all went silent. And then they heard it. Horses, multiple horses, approaching fast. Iris moved to the door and peered out into the darkness. Her face went pale. They're here. The men who've been searching for this. And they're armed. There were 4 of them. Elijah could just make out their dark silhouettes against the moonlit sky as they dismounted. They moved with a quiet, confident purpose. Like men who were used to this kind of work. Iris pulled back from the doorway, her face grim. They know we're here. The wagon must have given us away. Caleb grabbed the journal and started shoving documents into an old canvas bag he found in a corner. We take what we can and we run. Try to get this to a sheriff in another county. Elijah shook his head, his mind racing. They'll chase us down before we get a mile. We're on foot. They have horses. One of the men outside called out, his voice carrying across the empty rail yard. We know you're in there. We know what you found. You can make this easy or you can make it hard. Either way, those documents are coming with us. Iris checked her revolver. 6 shots. 4 men. Even if I don't miss, those aren't good odds, she whispered. Elijah looked around the train car. At the boxes and crates. Decades of guilt and proof. All of it about to fall into the hands of men who would either destroy it to protect the powerful people involved, or use it for their own blackmail and extortion. Caleb moved to the other side of the train car. There's a window here. It's boarded up, but I might be able to break through. We could slip out the back while they're focused on the front. Elijah joined him, using his knife to pry at the old wooden boards. They were rotted in places. One board came loose, then another. But it wasn't quiet. The men outside heard the splintering wood. Boots crunched on gravel as they moved faster, splitting up, surrounding the car. Iris positioned herself by the door. If they come in, I'll shoot the first one. Maybe it'll make the others think twice. Elijah got another board off. The window was almost clear. But then he realized Caleb had stopped helping him. He was just standing there, looking at the journal in his hands, at the documents scattered all around them. His expression was strange, resolved. What are you thinking? Elijah asked. Caleb slowly met his eyes. We can't let them have this. But we also can't carry it all. There's too much of it. Far too much. A cold dread started to build in Elijah's chest. What are you saying, Caleb? Caleb walked to the center of the train car. He knelt down and started stacking the papers, the ledgers, the documents into a neat pile. We burn it, he said. All of it. Right here, right now. They can't use it if it doesn't exist. Iris turned from the door, her eyes wide with disbelief. Are you insane? This is the proof. This is justice. It's the only way to make right what your father did. Caleb's voice was steady, calm in a way Elijah hadn't heard in 15 years. This is also ammunition for whoever those men work for. This evidence could be used to destroy innocent people. The descendants of the families our father hurt have already suffered enough. You think exposing this now, dragging their names through another scandal, is going to help them? Or will it just reopen old wounds and put targets on their backs? Elijah understood then. He understood what Caleb was really saying. If they exposed the truth, it wouldn't just destroy their father's reputation. It would expose the railway company, the officials who were bribed, powerful, ruthless people who would retaliate against anyone connected to the story, including the very families their father had already destroyed once. Iris's hands tightened on her gun. So we just let him get away with it? Let him rest in peace while the people he hurt get nothing? Caleb shook his head. No, we give them what they're owed. Quietly. From what we have. Every penny, every acre of land he stole. We return it, but we don't give them a scandal. We don't make them suffer again. Outside, the footsteps had stopped. The men were in position, waiting, planning their assault. Time was running out. Elijah pulled his father's letter from his pocket and read the last line again. They deserve to choose what to do with it, whether to expose the truth and lose everything, or to keep the secret and live with the weight. This was the choice. This was the real inheritance their father had left them. Not the evidence itself, but the terrible burden of deciding what to do with it. Iris lowered her gun slightly. If we burn it, she said slowly, those men out there have no reason to chase us. They have nothing to gain. But if we keep it, if we try to use it, we become targets for the rest of our lives. Caleb struck a match. He held the small flame over the pile of paper. This is everything, he said quietly. Everything we are, everything we have, our entire inheritance, every bit of security we ever thought we had. If we do this, we start over with absolutely nothing. Elijah looked at his brother. Really looked at him. He saw the angry boy who had blamed him for their mother's death. The bitter man who had hated him for 15 years. The stranger who was now asking him to throw away everything they had, together. The match flame burned down, nearly touching Caleb's fingers. Elijah reached out, took another match from the box, and struck it. He held it beside Caleb's. 2 flames, 2 brothers, 1 impossible choice. Iris watched them both for a long moment. Then, slowly, she pulled a match from her own pocket and struck it. 3 flames now, 3 siblings, bound by blood and burden. We do this together, Elijah said. We burn it. We walk out of here with nothing but the truth between us. We make it right, quietly. We live with the weight, and we face whatever comes next. As a family. Caleb nodded. He dropped his match onto the papers. Elijah dropped his. Iris dropped hers. The fire caught instantly, spreading fast through the dry, brittle documents. Thick, black smoke filled the train car. The evidence of their father's lifetime of crimes turned to ash. Outside, one of the men shouted, "Smoke! They're burning it! They're destroying it!" Footsteps rushed toward the front door. Elijah grabbed Iris, pulling her toward the newly cleared window. Caleb was right behind them. They climbed through just as the men burst in through the front. They dropped to the ground outside and started running. Behind them, the train car was an inferno, 40 years of secrets turning to smoke and ash. And ahead of them, there was nothing but darkness, and the slim, terrifying hope that they had finally made the right choice. They ran until their lungs burned, until the orange glow from the burning train car was just a faint smudge on the horizon. They ran until the sounds of shouting men faded into the chirping of crickets. Finally, Elijah stopped, bent over with his hands on his knees, gasping for air. Caleb collapsed against a rock formation, his chest heaving. Iris stood watch, her revolver still clutched in her hand, scanning the darkness behind them. No one was following. The men had no reason to chase 3 ghosts who were carrying nothing of value. After a long moment, Iris finally holstered her weapon. "They're not coming," she said. "Without the documents, we're worthless to them." Elijah straightened up slowly, the cool night air stinging his lungs. Everything we had is gone. Everything our father built. Every piece of security we ever had. Caleb let out a laugh. It was a broken, weary sound. We never had it. It was never ours to begin with. It belonged to the people he stole it from. We just finally gave it back. The three of them stood there in the immense darkness. Three strangers bound by blood and a terrible choice. Three people who had lost everything they owned, and in doing so, had somehow gained something far more important. Iris spoke first, her voice quiet in the night. What now? We have nothing. No evidence, no inheritance, no way to prove what happened. Elijah looked at his brother, then at his sister. We remember, he said. We carry it. And we make it right. It's the only way we can. 2 months later, Elijah stood outside a small, run-down house at the edge of town. The deed in his hand was for the last piece of property he owned in the world. The ranch he had spent 15 hard years building. He knocked on the door. An older woman answered. Her face was weathered, her eyes filled with a deep, ancient tiredness. Yes, she said. Elijah held out the deed. Your family name is Miller. It was on a list my father kept, a list of families he wronged. This land. It should have been yours. The woman stared at the document, her brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand. Elijah's voice was steady. My father stole from your family decades ago. I can't give back what was taken then. But I can give you what I have now. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's yours. The woman took the deed with a shaking hand. She looked at it, then back at Elijah, her eyes searching his face. Why? Why would you give up everything? Because it was never mine to keep. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. She just closed the door quietly. Elijah walked away, feeling lighter than he had in his entire life. Caleb did the same with his properties. Small parcels of land, a modest savings account. Everything was distributed among the descendants of the families their father had destroyed. Most of them didn't understand why. Some refused to accept it at first. But Caleb was persistent. He explained nothing. He just gave. He made restitution without asking for forgiveness or recognition. Iris sold the little house where she'd grown up, the one her mother had lived in while loving the man who had killed her own brother. She found the remaining family members, gave them every penny, and told them only that justice had been delayed, but it had not been denied. They asked questions, but she gave no answers. She just walked away, carrying nothing but the weight she had chosen to bear. The three of them met again 6 months after the train car burned. They met in a small town none of them had ever been to before. A place with no history, no expectations. A fresh start. All they had was each other, and whatever they could build from nothing. Elijah got a job at a stable, mucking stalls and tending horses. It was honest work. Caleb found work at a lumber mill. The hours were long, the labor was hard, but it was his own. He earned every cent honestly. Iris got a job at a local boarding house, cooking and cleaning. Simple tasks that belonged to her and no one else. They lived together in a single cramped room above the general store. It was nothing like what they'd had before, but it was theirs. Built on their own efforts, not on blood, or theft, or lies. One evening, Caleb was sitting on the steps outside. Elijah came and sat down next to him. They watched the sun set in comfortable silence. Finally, Caleb spoke. Do you think we did the right thing? Burning it all? Elijah considered the question. He thought about the families who had received deeds and money without any explanation. He thought about the scandal that never broke, and the powerful men who never had to answer for their crimes. I think, he said slowly, we did the only thing we could live with. Caleb nodded. I spent 15 years hating you, blaming you for things that were never your fault. Elijah's throat felt tight. And I spent 15 years believing you were right to hate me. Caleb turned and looked his brother square in the eye. I was wrong. About everything. Elijah met his gaze. So was I. Iris came out and sat down on the step between them. She looked at both of her brothers. Our father left us a burden, she said softly. A choice between justice and mercy, between truth and peace, between punishing the guilty and protecting the innocent. We chose. We chose to carry the weight ourselves, instead of passing it on to anyone else. Elijah looked at his sister, then at his brother. At the family he never knew he had. A family built not on blood alone, but on a shared burden and a shared, impossible choice. Caleb stood up and offered his hand to Elijah. Elijah took it, and Caleb pulled him into an embrace. 15 years of silence and anger dissolved in that one moment. Iris stood and joined them, her arms wrapping around both of her brothers. 3 siblings, united not by inheritance or secrets, but by the choice to do what was right, even when it cost them everything they had. They had no wealth, no property, no reputation to protect. They just had each other. And the quiet knowledge that they had finally broken the cycle their father had started so many years ago. The train car was ash. The evidence was gone. The truth remained buried. But the weight was shared now, carried by 3 instead of 1, and somehow that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where courage and destiny collide in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you stories like these.